In the distant future, a group of 5 teenagers set out on a school-sponsored space expedition led by their science teacher, Mr. Harrow. The goal was to study a newly discovered strange planet called Aeon 6. It was a planet like no other, lush with alien vegetation, towering mountains that touched the sky, and mysterious blue and green lights that shimmered in the atmosphere. It was a scientific marvel, and everyone on Earth was eager to learn more about it. What made the planet truly intriguing, however, was the discovery of a gigantic cave near the planet's equator, a cave that seemed to pulse with an odd, ethereal glow. Scientists were calling it the Cave of Ages. The team of teens, excited and naive, stepped out of their spacecraft, following Mr. Harrow's lead. They were armed with only their curiosity and a few research tools. The atmosphere of Aeon 6 was breathable, a strange phenomenon in itself, but they knew that the cave was the real mystery. The teenagers, Sarah, Leo, Ben, Mia, and Jason, had heard all kinds of rumors about the cave from the scientists back on Earth. Some said it was a time anomaly, others thought it was a portal to another dimension, but none of them could resist the allure of the unknown. Mr. Harrow insisted they explore the cave quickly and gather as much data as possible. With each step closer, they could feel a strange hum vibrating through their suits. The cave's entrance was enormous, nearly as tall as a skyscraper, and seemed to pull them in with an invisible force. It was as if the very air inside beckoned them, whispering secrets they couldn't yet understand. Nervously, they all walked through the mouth of the cave, their eyes widening at the sight of the cave's interior. It was unlike anything they had imagined. The walls shimmered with glowing symbols that shifted and moved as if they were alive. Strange, otherworldly stalactites hung from the ceiling, pulsing with a soft green glow. It was mesmerizing. Then, without warning, the ground began to tremble, and the cave entrance sealed shut behind them with a deafening rumble. Panic set in, and Mr. Harrow immediately reached for his communicator, but all signals were dead. "Stay calm," he ordered, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. It was then that Sarah, the group's most observant member, noticed something odd. "Look at the symbols," she said, pointing at the cave walls. The glowing symbols had changed color, shifting from green to a deep pulsating red. Before they could react, the entire cave was filled with a blinding flash of light. They all fell to the ground, disoriented, unable to see anything. Seconds later, the light faded, but everything was different. The air was colder, and the walls had grown tighter around them. Mia's watch, which she had set to Earth time before they left the ship, had stopped ticking. Confused, they tried to make sense of what had just happened. Suddenly, Jason gasped and pointed at his hand. He had a small, fresh scar on his wrist that hadn't been there moments ago. "I understand," he muttered. "I cut yourself like that when I was 5. How did it get here now?" The others were just as confused. Mr. Harrow tried to calm everyone, but his voice was shaky, uncertain. They decided to move deeper into the cave, hoping to find a way out. Hours felt like days, and the deeper they went, the stranger the cave became. They noticed that their bodies were changing, subtly but noticeably. Leo's hair had grown longer, and Ben's face seemed more mature. Fear gripped them as they began to realize what was happening. Time was moving differently inside the cave. Every second spent in the cave aged them years. They were trapped in a place where each second equaled a year on Earth. Desperation began to set in. They searched for an exit, but the cave seemed endless, twisting and turning, always leading them deeper into the unknown. With each step, they grew older, and their memories of the outside world began to blur. Days turned into months as they aged rapidly. Jason, who had been the youngest, was now visibly in his late 20s. The terror was overwhelming. Mr. Harrow, now aged and fragile, tried to guide them, but even he began to succumb to the weight of time. One day, as they reached what seemed like the heart of the cave, they found a massive swirling vortex of light, the source of the cave's strange energy. It was beautiful, yet terrifying. Ben, who had grown bitter and impatient, suggested they step into the vortex. "It's our only way out," he said, his voice hoarse with age. But Mia, now in her 40s, was convinced that the vortex was a trap. An argument broke out, and Ben, in a fit of desperation, threw himself into the vortex. He vanished instantly. They never saw him again. Fearful and exhausted, the remaining four decided to stay together. As they wandered deeper, they discovered an old weathered diary lying on the ground. It was Ben's. Somehow he had survived for decades in the cave and had tried to find them. The entries were heartbreaking. He had lived alone in the cave for what felt like centuries, desperately searching for a way out before giving up and succumbing to madness. They read his final words. "The cave is alive. It won't let us leave. Each of us is trapped in a different layer of time." Despair settled over the group. They were growing old, their bodies now that of middle-aged adults. Mr. Harrell, who had grown frail and weak, died quietly in his sleep one night. His final words were, "Find the light. It's the only way home." But no one understood what he meant. Their supplies ran low, and they had no choice but to keep moving, even as their bodies grew weaker with each step. Years passed. Jason, Sarah, Leo, and Mia were now elderly, barely able to walk. Then, one day, they stumbled upon something incredible. Another cave entrance, hidden deep in the rock. It was identical to the one they had entered years ago. With the last of their strength, they pushed forward, stepping into the light beyond the caves. It was blinding, just as it had been when they first entered, but this time they didn't stop. The next thing they knew, they were lying on a rocky beach, back on Aeon 6. But everything was different. Their bodies were no longer old. They were teenagers again, just as they had been when they first entered the cave. But the planet was unfamiliar, its once lush landscape now a barren wasteland. Their ship, which they had landed only what felt like days ago, was nothing but a rusty heap. Their mission clock read 64 years since they had first landed on Aeon 6. When a realization dawned on them, the cave had somehow reversed the aging process, but they had been missing from Earth for over 6 decades. The cave was a time loop, trapping them in an endless cycle of youth and age, bending time in ways they couldn't understand. They were young again, but they were still lost, with no way of contacting Earth and no knowledge of what had happened to the rest of humanity. As they sat on the empty, desolate beach staring at the sky, they noticed something strange. A light, faint but visible, shining from the mountains far in the distance. It was the same light they had seen deep in the cave. Hope, fragile and flickering, sparked in their hearts. Perhaps, they thought, the cave wasn't a prison after all, but a guide. Perhaps it was leading them somewhere they were meant to be, to an answer they had yet to discover. With no other choice, they began to walk towards the light, their faces determined, ready to uncover the truth about the Cave of Ages, whatever that might be. And so their journey began anew, trapped in a world where time was a riddle and every step held the promise of revelation or ruin. They knew only one thing. The cave had changed them forever, and they would never be the same again. The answers they sought were out there, somewhere in the wasteland of Aeon 6, hidden among the shadows of time. They just had to find them before it was too late.